You are live.
All right. So in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order here today. We can start off with a roll call. So we'll start in the first congressional district. Commissioner Tobias.
Present.
Great. All right. Commissioner Anthony from the second.
Present.
Okay. Commissioner McClellan from the third.
Present.
And I don't see Ben here, but we'll kind of keep an eye out for him. Commissioner Ram from the fifth.
Present.
All right. Commissioner Prentice from the sixth.
Present.
All right. And Commissioner Bissonette from the seventh.
Present.
And Commissioner Phillips from the eighth.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. My connection seems kind of not good. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you pretty well here. So
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm not able to video, but that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think Jason was having kind of a similar deal. And I think Commissioner Rangel just came on. There he is.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
There we go. No worries. No worries. We're talking about connection issues in the beginning. So we get everybody here. So we'll go ahead and start there. It looks like our first order of business here is an introduction of our soon-to-be GIS mapper here, Wyatt. And I don't want to butcher your last name, but is it Paytesh?
Paytesh, yeah.
Paytesh.
J makes a Y sound.
There you go. There you go. I apologize in advance. So,
no worries at all.
Yeah,
I thought you did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if Moon or Jack would be better doing an introduction, but glad to have you with us. Yeah.
I guess I'll just quickly introduce Wyatt. He accepted the position today, so we're working as quickly as is possible to get him onboarded officially. We'll be informing him right now, as I inform the rest of you, that his first technical day will be Monday the 16th, due to some, I think you have to start on a pay period or something like that. I'm not that well versed in the HR world here at the state, but he is here tonight he was nice enough to make time very quickly to be here tonight. And I think he could just give a little introduction of himself and tell you where he's from, what he's done, and just say hi. And then we'll get deeper into the weeds with him in the coming weeks, definitely.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wyatt Paytesh. I'm originally from Bayfield County in the town of Delta, so that's where I grew up. My parents owned a resort up there. I went to school down in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, maybe up for some of you. But I graduated from Eau Claire in May of 2020 with a geography and economics degree. And since September of last year, I've been working as a GIS coordinator for the Ho-Chunk Nation. So I'm happy to be along with you guys. While I was in school, I worked with one of my professors on some redistricting research. So it's an interest to me, and I'm very happy to help in any way that I can and be a part of this process for the whole state of Wisconsin.
Great, and I'll just chime in to say it's been great to meet Wyatt recently. I think he's got a terrific combination of GIS background, some redistricting knowledge, a lot of Wisconsin knowledge, and just a great can-do attitude. So we talked about some of the work ahead, and I'm excited for us all to be able to collaborate on the process of putting out some maps.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wyatt, and thanks for we'll look forward to working with you in the future. We'll kind of talk about a little bit more detail about how we can best work together as a commission with you, and perhaps meeting individually with some of the commissioners too as we go along, just to kind of make sure that we're utilizing your time and utilizing your services appropriately. But thanks so much for being with us. My son's name is Wyatt as well, so you're already starting in the plus column with me. So.
Good to hear.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess with that being said, do you guys have any questions at all for Wyatt while we have him here? Or all right. Awesome.
Oh, one quick one, Chair Ford. I just want to welcome Wyatt, as we all did. I saw us in the chat. And are you still in the Eau Claire area, or where are you based right now? Physically?
Yeah, I'm based in the Eau Claire area. I live up on on 3rd and Vine in Eau Claire, and then I commute down to work in Black River Falls a few times a week and work from home a few other times a week.
Oh, good. Then we're fairly close. I'm in Menominee, so almost a neighbor.
Pleasure.
Awesome, guys. Any other questions for Wyatt right now, or just a lot of welcomes? That's great. We're happy to have you, Wyatt. Thanks for coming on board. And so with that, I know Tony is having some connection issues, so we can circle back if he has any other questions or anything like that. But I guess the next, order of interest will be discussing the communities of interest submission. So I guess, Moon, I can turn over to you right now.
Sure, we'll give you a quick update on where we are with communities of interest. So we have, we put reports out every Wednesday to tell you how you're doing. So today we just finalized our report. And I can tell you that this week, you've achieved a really nice even split of written testimony, districting plans, and COI maps. Just went through and looked at what kinds of COI maps are coming in. Oh, actually, let me pull up the right report. When I get that recompiled, I'll share my screen and show you. And I'll tell you what we've done in the lab is pivot to, instead of these kind of weekly trend reports that are more narrative and that try to tell you qualitatively some of the things that are coming in, we've shifted gears and really geared up to do the data crunch now and start producing some of the emergent COIs that come out of the aggregation process. So we got tomorrow, I hope you all know, is the big day. Census drop day, the PL 94-171 that we've waited for 10 years comes out tomorrow at noon. And so we're geared up for twin processes over here in the lab to support your work. One of them is just to take all those numbers for all the census blocks all over Wisconsin, process them and fuse them and update Districtor to reflect the new canonical population for the next 10 years. So that's something we hope to have done very quickly once we get our little hands on that data at noon tomorrow. Then the aggregation process, I'll tell you a couple words about it. I'm happy to take questions, but here's the way our pipeline works. First, we take all of those COI submissions that we've received, which numbers in the hundreds, and we cluster them geographically to see where they're coming from. Within the geographic clusters, we take all the keywords and we cluster them narratively so that within an individual area, our process is designed to detect whether there are 2 or 3 different kinds of classifications or themes that people are writing about within a given geographic area. And then we'll fuse those into a heat map and tell you at the end of the process what consensus or emergent COIs we detected. So you should expect to see several dozen of those. And each one will be supported by its own several dozen submissions from the public. So we think this is I hope this is a really cool way for you to kind of see the data. Instead of getting a pile of 400 individual submissions, you'll get them kind of sorted by place and topic and then heat mapped so that you can see where is the terrain in which people were talking about particular concerns. So we've spent the last few days refining that pipeline, and tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we start pushing the data through. So you'll be getting your first crack at a kind of synthesized COI report, as opposed to what you've been getting so far, which is just an overall trends and description at the end of next week. And now let me see if this recompiled so I can show it to you. There we go. So if I can share my screen, I'll show you. So the Wisconsin submissions through August 8th. Actually, so this was actually a slower week, like much slower than the previous week. You can see the numbers here, but the numbers I've had my eye on are these overall numbers. So you're up to 649 unique submissions that come with a map and a description. So that's, as I said, hundreds of submissions, and we'll be doing our best to filter those into kind of usable themes and areas. And let me show you a picture of how it looks this week. So this is this week's submissions. And this is the cumulative submissions, which you just busted through the 1,000 different areas that were mapped by people. So those 600 and something different entries collectively contained over 1,000 areas that people mapped and described. And they cover the entire state. So we're really excited to shift gears from just sort of telling you what we see in human terms to putting it through a kind of principled data science process and showing you what comes out on the other side. Do you have any questions about the plan that we're implementing now to synthesize those so that we can show you kind of a smaller number of consensus or kind of aggregated submissions by the end of the process?
I guess a quick question, Moon. So with these, the clusters that you have, or that you'll be providing, will this be something that's like a clickable function on like the distributor software, like when we're drawing like the assembly and congressional senate?
Yeah, so the plan is you'll be able to see it as a data layer in districting, so that when you're drawing the lines, you'll see kind of, oh, here's an area of interest where people were talking about a shared watershed, and you'll see that while you're drawing. We're also making shapefile exports so that you can see it in standard mapping software like ArcGIS, QGIS, or any of the redistricting specific packages. Actually, we've been having a lot of conversations recently with some of the mapping software providers about how to get it to be easily viewable in the standard redistricting software. So yeah, that's the plan. The plan is first synthesize and then export to all the formats that people use when they do mapping. All right. Well, excited to see how that comes out. So you should expect next week to start seeing some results.
Awesome. And it looks like kind of the next point of interest kind of goes from this one, and that's to decide whether or not to close the community of interest submissions. Is there a particular, I guess, timeline that we're working with that, Moon, or is there any benefit or, you know?
So I would say the nice thing about the process is that because we have this now set up as a data pipeline, you can rerun it at any point. So you could keep it open. I mean, I think the reason you saw that big drop off from hundreds of submissions the previous week to just a more of a trickle in the last week was that people were trying to get things in by August 1st. So folks had in mind that the process would shift as we moved into the census data. So this is really a choice for you to make on the basis of your timeline. It's easy enough for us to do, and my preference would be, in fact, if we give you the aggregated COIs now and then do it again in a month and see what's come in the intervening time. You may decide that you want to cut it off because at some point you might want to pivot to having a finished product in COI terms. I can see value to leaving it open so that people can continue to comment. I can see value to continue to accept districting plans, but closing down COIs so that you don't have to sort of do the consideration process repeatedly. I will support whichever decision you make about how long you want to keep COI collection going. I will mention though that I do think, especially when you start to put out draft plans, it'll be really nice to keep the portal open to have people be able to not only comment on them, but also to be able to modify them and resubmit them. So I definitely see more sort of strategic upside to keeping the districting plan submission, the ability for the public to submit plans open as long as you're willing. And with COIs, it's up to you. It's a question of whether you want to think about them on a rolling basis or whether you want to move sooner to having a kind of finished aggregation that you can use in your process.
I guess I'll just open it up to the commissioners to see, what you guys' thoughts are on closing versus leaving it open on a rolling basis.
The issue might be that we don't have strong opinions, Chris. I mean,
Yeah.
And I would say leave it open, because I was looking at how many we had in Moon's map, and I think we had 5. And so I suspect that there's room to get more.
I think, yeah, I would just echo that greater accessibility to the public in most situations is better than less accessibility. So leave it open would make sense.
yeah, I agree. Unless we have a strong reason to close it, might as well leave it open.
Yeah.
I have more of a tendency to want to close it, just to have a cleaner cutoff of the data and say, this is what we're going to use, and these lines aren't going to change, because that's our second level of criteria, right? Is looking at the communities of interest. And if that keeps changing, I mean, we're in a cycle of keep reevaluating. And at one point, I think, especially I think we have the bulk of the data. I'm not sure, but I think we do have the bulk of the data that we probably will get. Maybe if we give the community, a good heads up and say we'll be accepting them for this period, maybe another 2 weeks, maybe the end of August, maybe. I'm kind of really flexible about the date, but I kind of like having a hard and fast date to close it.
Could we have it both ways, that it's left open passively if people want to add to it, but that there's a date that's noted on the page that says analysis will be based on data that's submitted by August 20th. And then you just move on and you can have it open, yet you have a hard date for your data pull.
That sounds great to me from the point of view of the person who has to decide when to push the button.
Just throw out a date. I don't know what that date is, but that could help you perhaps. And then we're just transparent about when it's pulled, what we're working off of.
But I like the idea of saying, we will definitely consider submissions that come before this date. And that way, folks won't feel they're wasting their time.
And I agree. I think along the lines of what Anne-Marie was saying, as we get the official numbers tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of publicity behind it, and it may bring our efforts into the forefront more so than they have been. I mean, I know we probably get thousands of people watching us right now, but more we may get 1,001 after this. So that may be that one community that we're looking for, right? And so if we want, I don't know, I like the idea of a couple of weeks after that data is out and just drawing it as a hard stop. Any particular date? I guess we can do 2 weeks from tomorrow. I guess it's fine. Here's
another thought. It might be that if you release the preliminary aggregated COIs, that'll inspire people to be like, wait, why didn't you hear from my part of the state? And that will drive a second round of submissions. So you might think of making a call for submissions coordinated with publicly releasing the first round of aggregations. And then maybe give people 2 weeks after that to submit, for example.
Is there a press release plan for tomorrow that could be woven into? Are we acknowledging that the data is dropped and such tomorrow or the next day or something?
There's no press release plan, but you guys might have noticed that I had my camera off for a little while. That was because I was talking to communications people. There are questions about what you guys are doing. So I'm just making sure that the answers reflect reality, which is why I was on the phone. But I think that one thing I can ask to be added to said answers is that the portal's still open, that communities of interest are wanted still. And if we wanted to try to add a deadline to that in there, I can certainly relay that information to anybody that asks.
Yeah, so 2 weeks I have is the 26th. And so I guess we can set that as a date. Jacob, we're going to put something together and then perhaps like a link with the COI log that we have right now, just so people can assess it and have that time to reflect on it if they want to submit.
So you'll get your first report from us on the 20th, which is the end of next week. And 2 weeks from then is September 3rd, if you wanted to pin to that.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
So it would close, not close, but the final report will be pulled September 3rd in this case.
September 3rd, yeah. All right. Okay. Any other thoughts on COIs? And again, we'll kind of double back to it when we get the report too. But all right. It looks like we had an official vote regarding this, but it seems like we have a general consensus with this. I don't think a vote is really necessary in this unless anybody has anything different. So, okay. So it looks like our next item is the review of the newest maps created. So I'll turn it back over to Moon again.
All right, so just to keep you up to date, I will pull. So there's a tag page or event page on Districtor where we've been posting the plans that we produce, answering to the questions and requests of the line drawing subcommittee. I will put that URL into the chat just as a reminder. And so this is fully public. And so I'll share my screen so that folks who are watching can also navigate to the page. All right. So here you can see just a steadily increasing number of plans. Plans 1 through 20 are assembly plans. And now there's a pair of state Senate plans and a pair of congressional district plans that were just made so that over the course of the first 20 plans, we refined a kind of methodology and then applied that methodology refined on the assembly to Senate and congressional. And as always, I'll say the same kind of caveat that I always do when I show these. These are not PMC produced maps intended for being proposed for adoption. They're starting points, and you now have a new line drawer on hand who will use these starting points, take the COI testimony into account, talk to you individually in the coming weeks about how to move the lines to better reflect the parts of the state that you know best. And from these starting points, a process of iteration and improvement will ensue that will lead to the plans, presumably, that you will ultimately adopt. So I just want to point out that you can click into any of these and kind of see what it looks like. So this is one of the Senate plans that I have open now, and you can see it's quite well balanced. It's balanced to within 1% on the most recent population data that we have until tomorrow. And then you can take a look at kind of contiguity, no gaps detected. Great, that means all the districts are just one piece. And you can take a look at all the other, if you're curious, you can see sort of the breakdown by race across the districts, how the vote splits across the districts in 8 recent statewide elections, just to get a feeling for whether the map is responding to the wishes of the electorate, and all kinds of other things that you can see when you click in here. And then just to help you understand kind of the process, we've been providing a summary document that you can use to understand kind of how the criteria were layered in, excuse me. I've been thinking a lot about labeling. And so according to the different criteria in the interpretations that were endorsed by the line drawing subcommittee, we're sort of playing around with whether we can get maps that are good on all your criteria. And can you do well on the lower ranked ones without sacrificing the higher ranked ones? And so as you see over the course of moving from plan 1 to plan 20, we're able to layer in more and more criteria. And then these are the new pair of Senate plans and pair of congressional plans for you to look at. So all these are, once again, is plans for your consideration to help you think about the trade-offs between your different criteria. And we hope that they provide you with a really great set of starting points for your modification. Does anyone have any questions about the process that produced those, or how you might end up using them?
Yeah, Moon, I have a question. So those tables that you showed us, those are now on that that district tag page that you showed us?
Everything's live.
Those tables are there. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been trying to keep up as we keep on producing new maps. I've been keeping that document updated so that you can kind of follow along with the thinking. Right.
Were you going to show us those blue, purple, red data maps?
Sure, that's all in there. I thought we might keep it brief for now, but I'm happy to show. So I think what you mean. Oh no, I know what you mean. No, that's not in here yet. But for a moment, what I thought you meant was these charts that show you kind of how the plans perform from election to election. These are in here. Yeah. You're asking about a different thing, which isn't in here yet, but I will pull it up.
Right. Yeah, I think Anne Marie and Chris know what I'm talking about. The very visual way of seeing what the maps do to competitive balance.
Right here. So we're still kind of refining these visualizations, but we think they'll be a really effective way of communicating. Here's some maps that show you district by district, whether each district went always Democratic across the 8 elections, that would be bright blue. Did it go always Republican across the 8 elections? That would be bright red. Or did it sort of sometimes go sometimes go Democratic and sometimes Republican? And those are the various shades of purple and magenta that you see here. So maps 15, 16, and 17, you see a lot more shades of purple. And that means there are a lot more districts that sometimes go D and sometimes go R, a lot more what you might call swing districts in plans 15 through 17. 18, 19, and 20 are a little stabler. And then let's compare this. Let me just pull this up. Let's compare this to the enacted plan, just to give you a point of reference. So here's the enacted plan, and you see a whole lot of bright red and bright blue. So the enacted plan has a large number of districts, is dominated by districts that are either always Republican or always Democratic. And some of the plans that we've been able to generate through the process of discussion with the line drawer subcommittee have more districts that sometimes go one way and sometimes the other. And that's what makes those plans more responsive to changing vote preferences of the public. So just again, to emphasize, all of this is up to you and your interpretation of your criteria. But what we've been able to confirm is that our methodology can find examples of plans that change hands more often, can find examples of plans that have performed consistently proportionally throughout the decade. So once you articulate your preferences, we're able to supply examples, which is kind of nice. And we don't have to give up county integrity, town integrity, population balance, or anything else so far discussed in order to do that.
Do you have those red, blue, purple maps? Do you have that in like table form such that you can say how, like for the assembly for Wisconsin map 16, like how many districts reliably are red, how many are blue, how many are purple?
I do, yeah, that was
to compare with the enacted maps.
Now that's in the one, okay, good. So that's, at least part of that is in the screen, the first screen share that I showed, which is this one. So this one is online already, and it shows that the so-called responsive maps 15, 16, and 17 have some always Republican, some always Democratic, and a healthy number, 30 to 34 districts that swing. Is it clear what this means to everybody? Does everybody follow this? So something over here that shows up in the column 5, that means in 5 out of 8 elections, it was won by a Republican, and in the other 3, it was won by a Democrat. Whereas something over here went Republican 8 out of 8 times. And then you can see the stable maps are, the extremes are higher and it's a little bit lower in the middle. So only 17 swing districts per plan. And then I believe, I didn't include it here, but I believe I have. So let me find it quickly. I think the statistics for the enacted plan were even starker. There were only maybe like 11 swing districts, but I'll see if I can, that's just from memory. I'll see if I can find it before the end of the call. So the idea is, whereas a hallmark of a certain kind of gerrymander would be all seats very safe and hard to swing, all seats that always go the same way. And your criteria cite proportionality as a goal, which means that it's better if the delegation, if the elected body is in closer proportion to the votes. So the 8 elections in our data set swing a little bit up and down, never very far from 50-50. And the question is, would the outcome swing along with the votes? And so these are different kinds of visualizations. We're playing around with the most effective ones to illustrate the difference between districts that are very safe for one side or the other versus districts that, according to actual recent voting patterns, can be up for grabs, might go to one party and might go to the other.
Yeah, the reason I emphasize it is because I think that's a good way to show these maps and to advocate for them and to compare our maps, what we're accomplishing versus the enacted maps. So that data in some manner, I hope it'll be available to us.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Use. Yeah, thanks. I'll quit.
Ben, did you have a question?
Yes. I noticed for the 2 congressional maps, neither of them have a district where greater than 40% of the folks in the district are people of color. And I know that's not an actual criteria or not in line with the legal requirements around the VRA. But can you talk, like, looking at those congressional district maps, not having any of those districts having more than 40% people of color, will that potentially lead into some challenges with the VRA, or should we be concerned about that?
So let me step back and give a little bit of an update on progress thinking about the VRA. So one of the challenges for kind of considering VRA compliance is that typically you'd need a data set which has not only general elections, but also has primary elections. So in VRA litigation, you typically check to see whether the preferred candidate of a minority group can be both nominated and elected. And that means you need to be able to process primary elections as well as general elections. And I'll just say it's been an interesting odyssey of discovering how Wisconsin election data works. Your state elections commission, in partnership with the LTSB, provides general elections at the ward level. In fact, they do a great job of providing 10 years worth of elections, all on the same shapes. They do not process primary elections. And I've had a little data odyssey in the last few weeks of trying to get hands on primary elections and get them processed by a process similar to the LTSB onto the same shapefile. And with some very hard work of folks in our lab, today we finished putting a set of primary elections onto the shapes. So just to give you an update, that's been, to do a good job on VRA, you really need to know something about both general elections and primaries. And we had a real data bottleneck where nobody in the state provides that data product. And we had to do some legwork and try to make it ourselves. So we'll be able to say a little bit at a higher level of sophistication what's happening with the VRA. Now that tomorrow we'll get the new population numbers, and now we have some past election data that we've been trying to put together for over 2 months. So just first of all, on the VRA, that's some progress to report. That's actually a pretty exciting breakthrough that we finally were able to match primary elections to the shapes, to the ward shapes. Okay, and so, but your deeper question there is, what do you need to do to be VRA compliant? And again, with the usual caveating, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a lawyer adjacent mathematician. Just to remind you the basics of how VRA compliance works. In order to sort of launch a VRA lawsuit, to be a plaintiff, to push a suit forward, you need to show that it's possible to create a majority minority district with certain properties. Should you succeed in a VRA lawsuit, the remedy at the end does not have to be a majority minority district. And so that's, why in conversations with the line drawing subcommittee, those spreadsheets that you see, the tables that you see, don't focus on majority minority, because it's a common misconception that that's a VRA requirement. And that's why we chose 40% POC, just as a kind of to differentiate it from the majority minority standard. So I don't think you should look at that column as being a close representation of in fact, it's not. It is simply not intended to represent the demands of the Voting Rights Act, but just to give you a view of whether any of the other properties have a consequence in that particular fairly arbitrary statistic to do with race and ethnicity. What you should be looking for, Ben, is that you're sure that you have at least a number of performing districts that you're comfortable with, effective districts that are effective for the preferences of the minority groups. And so in the coming weeks, that's what we'll be trying to layer into this analysis. We'll be running standard statistical techniques to learn who the minority preferred candidates are. And then we'll be able to, when Wyatt draws districts, we'll be able to analyze whether those districts are likely effective for minority groups. And that's how a VRA analysis is typically carried out.
Thanks, Moon. And I was also reminded sort of after I asked the question that in some ways, there was potentially packing that happened of photos of color. So in the enacted CD map. And so that doesn't, just
it's a delicate business, but time and again, the courts have reminded us that you can't use just a demographic percentage as a stand-in for effective opportunity to elect. And so it's there just to remind us that we need to think about opportunity for minority groups, but we'll be using a kind of opportunity to elect standard, which is better in line with the VRA.
Well, on that same line of thought, how soon do you think it would be beneficial for us to get someone involved, like from a VRA legal aspect, in terms of, Wyatt kind of drawing the lines with us, trying to decide where we need to put those. I would hate for us to go down the line of doing a lot of work and then having to backtrack it if it is not along the legal ramifications of the VRA.
I would be happy to work with anyone that you bring in to think about that with. I will be able to provide you with the quantitative side of that. If you ask questions, I have curated the data to try to answer them. But you are, the sort of, you're in charge of process, and should let me know if there are particular folks that you'd like to bring in to have the discussion. I'll be giving you all of, to the best of the ability that the data provides. We'll be giving you a really robust set of evidence that you can use to make those decisions. And then you'll need to make a call about whether to reach out for further expertise.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Another question for Moon, and I'm reluctant to ask this, knowing you're getting a big data dump tomorrow. But the 2020 election data, will that be populated pretty soon in Districtor?
That's a good question. Wisconsin, of course, is one of the states where we're tracking the election data. I believe last time we asked the folks at the Elections Commission, they said it wasn't quite ready yet. So that's really a question of when it's released by the Elections Commission. That may have already happened. We're working in a number of states, and I can't remember if Wisconsin's one of the ones that's out. But quite a few states, it's surprising, don't have their 2020 election data published yet statewide, and I'll have to check on Wisconsin. But it's certainly the intention to fold in that data as soon as it's available.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Tony.
I missed the first 5 minutes, so it's a two-part question. One, if I could be introduced to the grad student, and two, I guess I'm wondering what are the next steps now we have these great maps. that have been computer generated, and we've done the iterations and we've worked. And so what are we doing with those? Is the process going to be that the grad student use those now and refine them? So maybe that's an agenda point, but I didn't know. So
my understanding of the previous discussions was that you'd be setting up small meetings with Wyatt, one-on-one or one-on-two, to talk about the areas of the state you know best and start talking about how you might want to move lines from some of the starting points.
I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that. And is Wyatt there? What?
Yeah, Wyatt.
I'm here. Pleasure to meet you.
Where are you? I can't see you.
Oh yeah, Wyatt's camera's gone dark.
Oh, sorry.
There you are.
Oh,
Sorry.
hello, sir. Okay.
Pleasure to meet you, Tony.
What?
Pleasure to meet you.
Okay. Where are you?
I'm located in Eau Claire, and I work down in Black River Falls with the Ho Chunk Nation.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, and Tony, just to echo what Moon was saying, at the very beginning, we kind of talked about Wyatt's position, and the goal being to kind of meet individually with the commissioners to kind of go over more a more focused, detailed approach to where those lines are and where their districts are, to kind of see if we can work in a further view and then working our way out. So,
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions regarding the newer maps, the Senate and congressional that we get as well?
I just wanted to bring up, I remember I'd speaking with Anne Marie and Tony. Was there any need to discuss responsiveness in the congressional district context? Just because it obviously, with the assembly maps, having a bunch of swing districts in the middle is different than with only 8. And like Moon had said earlier about how you only get 12.5% jumps. So I didn't know if there needed to be any discussion over whether more maps should be created with more stableness or not. I'm agnostic as to it. I just remember talking about it in smaller meetings. So I wanted to make sure everybody heard that if they needed to.
Yeah, I think maybe the larger group might want to just hear Moon's comments on responsiveness with the congressional maps, because in our last meeting, if I'm recalling it properly, we all agreed that we like the responsive maps rather than the stable, but there is an issue with responsiveness in congressional maps. And
Sure, I'll make a couple comments, but just as a reminder, our intent is to provide you a menu that you can order off the menu. And so we'll be showing you a range of different maps with different properties, and then you'll select the ones that you like as your starting points. So here's the responsiveness issue and how it's a little bit different for congressional than for assembly maps, with Senate, of course, in between. So for assembly maps, there are 99 of them, just close to 100. And so if you have an election that's, say, 53% Republican, you can get pretty close to 53% of the seats as well, because there are 99 seats. But when there are only 8 congressional districts, then you can only have 0, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, and so on. And since an eighth is 12.5%, as Jack just said, you get bigger jumps in the seat share because there's just a smaller number of seats. So now if you have a 53% Republican election, say, you can get to 50%, which is 4 out of 8 seats, but then it would be a big jump up to get to 62.5. That would be the next possible share. And you have never had, in none of these statewide elections is as skewed as 62%. They're all in the rough, well, I can look it up exactly, but roughly, they're certainly all in the 45 to 55 range. I think with no exceptions. I'll double check that just to be sure I'm saying the exactly accurate thing. So in fact, here I know where to look it up. It is Yeah, the lowest Republican chair in any of those elections is 44.6, and the highest Republican chair in any of those elections is 53.4. So that's all, they're all fairly close. And so that gives you a bit of a different challenge when it comes to proportionality, because now the closest fraction is 4 out of 8 every time. So would you like a map that always had 4 blue districts and 4 red districts? Would you prefer a map that sometimes responds very responsively so that a 55% election gets 62.5% seat share? These are kind of values decisions for you to make. But just pointing out that it's not easy to hug the curve as closely with big congressional districts as it is with small assembly districts, where you can try to approximate the vote share much more closely with the seat share. Does that make sense? You can see it in the pictures where it looks like this. Right, so when you look at the congressional plans, you see this is 12.5% the difference between this and this. And so if you're trying to hug that blue line closely, well, one thing you could do is just always be at 50%, and that's always fairly close. But if you're going to go up and down at all, then you're sometimes going to kind of go fairly far away from the line in one direction or the other. And that's not true, with Senate districts, you can hug it much more closely. And with assembly districts, look how close you can get. You can get really close because now the denominator is 99ths. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. So responsive is great. And I think from the last conversation with the committee, like your decision, you had a responsive is great, stable is great. This is a choice to make, but there was fairly unanimous support among you last time for responsiveness. You like competitiveness, you like seeing the sea level, the seat share rise and fall with the sea level. And the question is, surely there's some point at which something is over responsive. So you're going to have to kind of think about how much you want the level to rise and fall. And I'll give you a menu of options, and then you'll choose one that feels to be the best qualitative balance of your priorities. Did anyone have reactions to that?
I guess I'm interested in how the line drawing committee reacted. Anne Marie, Tony, like what was your initial reaction? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you all came up with.
I guess I would prefer to be consistent, and for the congressional district maps have some responsiveness, just like we are with the Assembly and State Senate. So I guess that would be my instinct.
Yeah, I think for the consistency, but as terms of overall evaluation, I think I just would not put that much weight on that particular metric on a congressional map in the same way that I would do that for the other 2 types of maps. I think to me, it's an awareness issue that we're all aware of that metric and that it might not be as meaningful in this particular case.
So if you take a quick look at how that plays out, we gave you 2 example congressional maps. One of them always gave back 5 or 4 Republican seats, and so it's somewhat responsive. It goes up to 5 and down to 4. The other one swings all the way from 6 to 2. And so you just have to decide how responsive is the sweet spot for you, if that makes sense.
And then Moon, would it be likely that the 5 to 4, even the 6 to 2, would it be likely the same district is always the one that's kind of going back and forth, or?
Right, that's those red blue maps that Tony was asking for. So we're preparing all of those to show you. So when we have your final menu that you get to order off of, which of course we're updating all this with the new data that we get tomorrow, right? To be clear, these districts are balanced on estimated population data, but starting tomorrow, once we've processed, we can balance them on the real true data. So tomorrow is a big turning point. But when we give you this kind of what I keep calling menu to order off of, we'll show you which districts change. We'll give you maps of which districts change and which ones don't. I mean, it's an interesting, let me show you one more visual that I think captures nicely some of what we're talking about. What if you looked at the precincts themselves and you asked, are the precincts consistently blue or consistently red, or do the precincts swing, right? Because we're trying to build out of precincts. Here's the picture that you'd get for that. So this shows you the precincts of the wards, that is, the wards of Wisconsin. And it shows you some wards were blue all the way through, many wards were red all the way through, and then there's, you know, there's purples throughout. So the whole problem of redistricting, the thing that makes it such a wonderful playground for a mathematician, is it's all about how you group these precincts to create an aggregate that's either always blue, always red, or swingy, if that makes sense. So these are the tiny little particles, and then we have to group them into districts that kind of reflect the will of the people. And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I guess just to add another perspective, you know, I tend to want to lean, maybe spending some time looking back at the public testimony and seeing if there's some sort of guidance we can gain from public testimony around which preference or how to look at the congressional districts. I just think so much of our testimony came from people giving feedback around like state level stuff, but not all of it. But generally, you know, how would constituents feel if their congressional district was always Republican or always Democrat, but then there was this one congressional district that was always kind of a toss up. So that's why I sort of asked originally, Moon, like, do we know would it always be the same one? Would we be able to draw the maps in a way that made it so that like generally there was a few different districts, 2 or 3 that were like highly competitive on a regular basis? And so I guess I'd want folks to feel like their vote matters in their congressional district, even though we've heard so much feedback around the state level districts.
And I just wanted to show you, you can go to the portal and search. So if you search the keyword safe, as in safe seats, there's 27 people who want to tell you their opinion on safe seats. So I encourage you to go check this out. You can put in the word competitive and search, and there are 16 submissions that have something to say about competitiveness. So hopefully this search function is a way to say, you know, I'd like some guidance from the public on this, and go back and look for it.
Thanks, Moon. And then just kind of on a side note, with the data coming out tomorrow, I assume you and your lab, the folks at your lab, have a pretty busy weekend maybe ahead of you. And so I just hope that you all get some rest and take care of yourself. Appreciate
Thank you. We
yeah.
have lots of pizza nights planned in the bunker for the next couple weeks, but we're looking forward to it.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into, I guess, the discussion of census data. So our next bullet point. So I guess in general, I'll go ahead, Jack. Yeah.
I just, you know, I had added that agenda item just because I know, first of all, I want to say thank you all for all the work you're doing, and that includes Moon and everybody. We in the state government really appreciate it. I also apologize for just the general amount of uncertainty there is in this process, though of course I know that it's not my fault, but we're doing our best to keep you guys, you know, on a track and make sure that there's a plan, and so and help to fulfill whatever plans you come up with. So there had been discussion previously about a more public hearing to sort of announce the starting point maps that you're going to be working on with Wyatt. I don't think if we were to have that meeting tomorrow, we wouldn't really be ready, because for a bunch of reasons, but namely, you guys have done a lot of looking at assembly maps, and I think those are a little more, you could pick among the ones you've looked at, you could make a few choices and move forward. So I guess that's just the situation we're in. I've got the doodle poll with everybody's availability, and thank you all for filling that out. And to those of you I had to remind, just know that I had to remind a bunch of people, so don't feel bad. It's just what I felt like I had to do. So I guess there's some questions here, which is, One is for Moon, and Moon, our leader, Moon, essentially. The data comes out tomorrow, and you had just said a few minutes ago that the next sets of these could be with the real data, the starting point maps. What is the timeline on that realistically? Not any pressure in my asking, but just we don't want to plan for things we can't succeed on, I'd imagine.
Sure. Just want to stipulate that I always hope to be following your guidance. And
when I said leader, Moon, I only mean that you are very helpful to us. So.
This being a public call, just want to be clear that I see my role as 100% supportive.
Yes.
Okay, so what's possible with the data? So we've got a really great operation planned where we've guaranteed, so we have people that use our mapping tool in all, as I like to say, 52 states, because we have DC and Puerto Rico covered in the tool as well. And we've been guaranteeing that we'll have a full national update within 2 weeks of the data drop. So that's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Of course, you always try to promise something that you intend to exceed. And so we're shooting for a 1 week turnaround and promising a 2 week turnaround. That's just to give you a sense of what does it take. So what the Census Bureau has done, last time there were 11 million census blocks nationally. And in each of those blocks, this new redistricting data release, the PL 94-171, that's what's coming out tomorrow, tells you for every single block, not only how many people live there, but how many people of voting age, how many people with what combination of racial and ethnic identities. So for instance, in each block, how many Black and Asian and Hispanic people of voting age. So just think about the proliferation of all these categories. You can see that it's just an enormous data drop that's happening tomorrow. So the way the Bureau's geography works, there's a hierarchy of geography with blocks at the bottom. Everything else in the census geography universe is built out of those. So what we need to create is a system that can combine census blocks in the right patterns to answer questions like how many people live in Milwaukee. So you need to sort of pick out the right census blocks and add up all the attributes to be able to do that. So in some sense, the data operation is very simple. It's just about making sure that you have a system that can aggregate things correctly. And in some sense, it's really delicate because there's just so much stuff that you have to keep track of really carefully. So that's what we'll be doing, is republishing mapping modules across the country based on these new population totals, which are important because you need to balance your districts. That's why they're so fundamental to redistricting. One person, one vote says that any districts that are electoral have to be balanced within a jurisdiction. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing to the data. Not very much else will change because the geographies, Census puts out something called VTDs, or voting districts or voting tabulation districts, which are basically precincts. Those are made out of blocks like everything else in census land. And so they fall into the task of aggregation. Is that basically the spirit of your question, Jack? Sort of what are we doing and what's the timeline?
Yeah, I think so. And then how it could fit into what we do next. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just back that question up. So I guess knowing the census numbers are coming out tomorrow, what is our next plan to meet with Moon, either as a subcommittee or the full group, with the real numbers? I mean, should we set a goal for like the week of August 23rd to potentially see maps with the real numbers, for instance? And, you know, that's also a question for Wyatt. But so, I mean, this is a working meeting. So can we talk about that?
That would be fine on my end. Oh, and we'll keep you updated in the interim on when we're done processing the Wisconsin, the new mapping modules for Wisconsin.
But so it sounds like it probably won't be next week that it'd be useful to meet with you on those numbers, probably the week after.
Especially because next week, in addition to moving those numbers around, we'll be aggregating your COIs. So we should wait till the following week to have a follow-up.
Okay.
Yeah,
It-
I'm just wondering if Moon said you were giving yourselves 2 weeks, which would be 2 weeks in a day, that'd be August 26th, you know, not to put any, I don't want to put any undue stress on the system that's already stressed, right? And the COI maps, might that be available on the 20th? Maybe even that last week in August, the week of August 30th, maybe have a meeting there to consolidate both, you know, the final census data and the COI and start looking at them. And that would be the first time where everything would be available.
Yeah, I agree. All these pieces should be assembled by the end of August. That's right. And but you know, it's as you know, it's you can be drawing, right? So you can be drawing now. You can be starting to think about those sample maps that I hope you'll visit that site, PMC districts, click into some of those maps, zoom into your part of the state, and just start thinking about how you like the lines. Because that wrapping your mind around what it would take to move a line, and this is what Wyatt's here to help with, which I'm delighted to have Wyatt on board, because when you move one line a little to the left, you have to move another one a little to the right because of the balancing. And so starting to think about what it would take to move those lines in a direction that you prefer does not have to wait a couple weeks for these new numbers. You should and can start playing with the maps that are up now. That's why we got them up early, so that you can start experimenting and getting comfortable with what it looks like to move those lines.
Yeah, and I know why it starts officially on Monday, and I almost wonder if it would be beneficial to have some breakout groups with them just individually in the interim, so we can have, you know, that mindset of moving forward with when we get the real numbers.
I think that sounds like a good idea, and I'd be happy to help Wyatt facilitate Wyatt setting up those meetings with you guys and making sure whatever tech is. I don't know that we all know how to use Zoom now, but you know, helping to do that. And then maybe with an eye towards something a bit more public. I just had a calendar pulled up and now of course I can't find it, but in that week that ends with September 3rd of the whole group. Of course, that renders my doodle poll useless, and that's okay. I apologize then for.
No, I mean, I don't agree. I mean, I think
Okay.
you know, we talked about next week or the week after putting out some maps, and I think we should still do that. I can't hear you, Jack.
Sorry, I apologize. Of those that's on the PMC tags page now, like pick some of those to discuss, or what's the idea there?
I mean, well, we had talked about, you know, announcing our progress to this point, announcing that we've had a lot of meetings about computer generated maps with multiple iterations, and we've using our criteria, and we've reached a certain point where we're very comfortable with certain maps. We do need to modify them with the real census numbers, and we need to modify them, you know, with each district. But that doesn't mean we can't help advocate it. And you know, the thought was the numbers are coming out, so there's some interest out there for our maps. And we had talked about having a public meeting where, yes, here's our maps, here's our preliminary maps using preliminary data. Here's some data based on the tables of comparing the enacted maps currently versus what we've come up with in terms of number of counties and cities split and compactness and what it does to potential competitiveness. I think we could show the red, blue, and purple map. So, you know, I think there's still room for that in the next few weeks with some advocacy. So I don't agree with waiting till the week of September 3rd to do that, unless, you know, unless the rest of the commission thinks that way.
Tony, would that meeting be with the new data the actual census data?
No, it would be with the preliminary data. That's what we talked about before, is having some maps out there for people like Fair Maps to use and other advocacy groups, and putting on our website with the older data, with the preliminary data.
So just to give you two examples from other states to have in mind, there's pretty big news in Michigan in the last week or so when the AFL-CIO made some draft maps and released them. And of course, as you might guess, that triggered a whole lot of feedback. And so I do think there's some value if you have draft maps, even if they're made with estimated population, there's some value to having something out there for feedback. And you can do several rounds of that. A second data point is in Arizona, they have an independent commission, as I'm sure you know, that has already operated for 2 cycles. This is their 3rd cycle. And they have a 3-part process where first they publicly release grid maps that are made on an actual grid, and then draft maps, and then their final maps. And at each stage they take public feedback. So that's just a choice you can make. That's a thing you can do, is draw maps early in the process, throw them out to get feedback and see what folks think. An advantage of doing that is that you'll get the practice at sitting with the lines and thinking about move to the left, move to the right. And that will be like valuable, a valuable dry run for the real data that will be all pristinely compiled in the next few weeks.
So
Go ahead.
Tony, I'm just throwing it out again. I'm just trying to put it together. I know, and I understand, I was there for those conversations where we wanted to do it earlier using the preliminary data. It's just, I'm trying to factor in the communities of interest maps and assuming that those will be ready August 20th, which is a Friday. And we do want to make sure that the public is aware that they're there, and maybe have some, press release and understanding so they understand what it is, and then we can give them whatever our deadline is for doing our final data cutoff. They may submit beyond that, but everyone would know that we're going to cut them off at X date. So that would be like that week afterwards. I'm just trying to balance having those COI overlays and then the maps that we choose, how much that's might change our decisions.
Yeah, I do think the COI overlays are more for the final maps. I don't see them useful for the preliminary maps. It's just, we're not going to have that data, and it's too complicated. I'm just saying there's a chance for advocacy here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think more so what Anne-Marie is getting into is just kind of having that in a press release to kind of bring attention to the fact that we are, we're producing these preliminary maps. We have like a COI cutoff date. We're going to continue to work on from that point when we get our actual census data tomorrow, and just kind of bringing attention to everything. So, more so garnering interest in the interim and then producing maps once we have it. Now, the question of it at this point would be, which maps would we be submitting right now, or is it more so important to say, this is what we've been considering, in terms of responsiveness. This is what we mean by responsiveness versus, keeping on to attention to, how the maps are going with response to, the voting. And so, I think more so than anything else, probably getting the idea out there in a press release would probably be more beneficial at this point in time, versus kind of picking some arbitrary maps from the ones that we have right now. But I don't know, I'll open it up if anybody has anything different. All right.
Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I think we could use Assembly Map 16. That was a good map. And then we could choose one of those Senate maps and congressional district maps, or not. We could just do an assembly map saying this is where we're at in our process. And We could publish the map. We could publish the table that shows how it compares to the enacted maps for county splits, city splits, etc. You know, I'd be careful publishing the partisan lean %, but with Moon's help, we could publish the blue, purple, and red maps and those tables that go along with the blue, purple, and red. Very simple, you know, just do the assembly maps that we're comfortable with, perhaps, which again, I think is 16. But so that would be my input, that I do think we should do something in the next week or two to show our progress.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Tony, if I could just kind of circle back to what we were talking about earlier with the modifications of the lines, to reflect the fact that those were generated as starting points, I think it'd be great. I absolutely agree with you. You could put some, they're helpful starting points, and you can order map 16 off the menu. But then I'd love to see you sit down, each of you sit down with Wyatt and really look at the part of the map near you.
Yeah.
And think about any changes that you want to make. Because I think as a matter of procedure, your intention to, you know, kind of use your knowledge of the state and to kind of use your understanding of the public input to make changes so that you're not just plucking something off of a computer screen. It'd be great if that's reflected in the first maps that you put out.
Okay.
So I'd love to see you make some changes to the starting point map before putting it out there.
And again, that may roll back into, you know, us trying to set up times with Wyatt too to speak as well. And then, you know, we definitely can release some documentation saying, you know, this is what we're working on. These are, you know, these are the criteria we're working on as well, working towards more so, as well as the COI cutoffs that we have.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more, in terms of like publishing, all of this information is public as it is, right? And folks who have been paying attention to our work, I mean, like I, for instance, was able to speak a little bit at a North Shore Fair Maps committee, a group meeting just I think yesterday or Monday or something. And they're well aware of the fact that these preliminary maps are up there and are public. And so I see I think there is some value though, Tony, still to your point. Like I see where you're coming from in terms of like updating the public on our progress, given the fact we're going to have this really important monumental date tomorrow in the release of the census data. I think if people want to access the work that we're doing, right, they can just visit the website. They can look at the link to the preliminary maps as it is. They can watch these working meetings, and so they still have access to the work that we've been doing, regardless of whether or not we have like a formal publishing of them or like a release party of it, you know?
Yeah, I agree to a point, although presumably we have a media arm that should be helping us with this. And if we, you know, there's a difference between putting it on a website and asking people to go look for it and hoping that they do versus putting it out there for them.
So you're talking like a press release and like contacting media outlets. Yeah, I hear you. And I would agree that generally if we had the capacity to be more, you know, media savvy generally in this process, that would be ideal. But you know, if we're trying to pick one single public meeting to publicize our work, it might be better to wait. Because what I envision happening is that if we did something sooner rather than later before not using the new data, we would just have to plan another meeting shortly after our meetings with Wyatt, with like just more concrete maps, right? So there might be some redundancy, and all of us are volunteers. Well, you know, some of us are volunteers, Jack, and you and your crew stay pretty busy, but yeah, there's just
Yeah.
So is the intent just to give an update about where we are, to let people know that they still have an opportunity to propose community of interest? So maybe it's just an update and just, you know, an example of what's available, and then to say that the census data is available yet, and those maps haven't been produced, but those are coming out into the future. Just an update.
Yep.
Right, until we can get more solid maps, absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts, guys? But I don't know if Jack, if you had something there.
Well, I just, these are all good thoughts. I don't know what I should plan to do. I mean, do we want to maybe just have a line drawers meeting or I don't know what to do here, because if we plan a big update for everybody, we better have something to update and have a plan. I'm okay with any plan, but there needs to be one leaving this meeting if we're going to plan something public. So I
was going to say, I think probably along the lines of Ruben was saying, we need to get the information out that we are going to have a cutoff for our community of interest date, that we're going to, that we have these preliminary maps that we're working with, but they're not finalized, they're not inclusive of the most, the census data to be released tomorrow. And beyond that, it's more so going to be to continue to refer people to the maps that are public right now, just to kind of say these are active maps that we have that you can utilize, you can look at, and then afterwards, after we meet with Wyatt, perhaps we can produce in a more public format more definitive. I think we have more tech issues, more definitive maps that we can show, right? And so I agree with Moon. I don't like the idea of just kind of sending out menu items versus like maps that we've actually considered personally, right? That we've actually laid hand to.
Okay.
It feels like at minimum we'd want to kind of publicly demonstrate that we're excited about the census data coming in, that we're on it, that we're, I would think that we'd want to show our relevance in the short term. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious what we think could be the consequences about putting out draft maps that are based on the old data, and how those might be, how it might steer the conversation a direction that we might not want, or might not be productive for us. I don't know how that could play out in ways that might not be productive for us. If anyone has any thoughts on that. Or what you've seen in other states when they've come out with things.
What I've seen so far is that putting out draft maps produces a kind of surge of interest and engagement. Of course, some of it positive, some of it negative. Some of it says, don't split my backyard, but that if you're looking for ways to kind of keep the energy level high around this, which is certainly what you saw on your portal, the energy level leading up to August 1st was, stupendous. And if you want to kind of keep that energy level high, then releasing some preliminary draft maps and encouraging feedback might be a really nice way to do that. The question is, do you feel you might want to release not one, but a few in order to indicate that you're not, finishing the process, you're beginning the process. That's one way to indicate that you're not releasing anything close to final, is to give a few options. But I'll leave the wisdom of that to you.
Chris, can I make a I'm trying to help Jack here know what happens next. Okay, and I think we're in circles, and my concern is that we're going to, if we do something online like this, if we make this sort of a presentation in a public meeting, it will be very, very difficult to do it in a nuanced way. And where we are is in a very nuanced position, because there's lots of don't take this seriously, don't take this literally. There's a lot of that sort of caveating in our conversation amongst each other. And I'm afraid that can get lost in a public sort of vocal presentation. I'm just wondering if the next thing to happen would be to have you ask somebody to draft a press release that might capture what it is we want people to know in fairly nuanced and precise terms, and then release that press release after it's been vetted by the committee.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's appropriate on our end. I think that's kind of in the vein of what Ruben was trying to communicate as well, just to try to see if we can get something, in writing. This is what we're doing. This is where, these are the next steps that we have before we move forward, and to kind of garner some interest before we while we get that data in, the new census data.
I can work on that.
All right. Anything else you guys have, or any other questions at all? All right.
No, I was just going to say that I like the press release idea, and Jack, if you need any help writing it, I can help with the drafting to then later be wordsmithed by everybody else.
Thank you.
Hopefully I don't disconnect or anything. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, I'm having some tech issues, so might cut out. But I guess my one question was whether or not Jack or anyone else, frankly, has heard about any sort of timeline, and I'm sorry if I missed this too, if this already came up, around the Republican legislature's goals around stuff in their map drawing process.
No one really knows. Sorry. Though for once I feel no responsibility for that. That's you'd have to ask them, but no. Your guess is as good as mine, is as good as anyone I know. So
all right, guys. We'll go ahead and we'll work on I guess the press release there. Jack, feel free. Emery has offered help, and I can help too if you have any if you need any help with that too. So the next steps we'll be getting the census data tomorrow. I guess once Monday rolls around, we can reach out with Wyatt and kind of see what his availability is, see what everyone else's availability, and kind of coordinate that with the doodle poll that Jack sent out not too long ago too. So that being said, if there's nothing else, I guess we can go ahead and adjourn. All right. Thanks, guys.
thank you guys.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.